What is the difference between Eminem and Miley Cyrus? One key difference is that Eminem has balls and Miley Cyrus does not, right? Why am I asking you this? Why am I telling you this? Because the balls, also known in science as the testes, is a place where sperm is made, right? Sperm is the male sex cell. Okay, and this process of making sperm is called spermatogenesis. And don't worry, this crazy word is not for the topic of today's video. The process of making sperm called spermatogenesis will be a topic of another video. So I'm putting a sun here, and this sun will indicate that I will make a separate video on this process. But I'm just trying to get to a point here. So what can Miley Cyrus make then? Because if testes make sperm and she doesn't have testes, she has the female version of balls, which is basically called ovaries, then what can she make? She can do a process called oogenesis, which is basically making this female version of sperm, which is egg, right? Which is an egg. Not this kind of egg. We're talking about the cell kind of egg, the cell, right? Just because sperm is a cell, so egg is a cell. And in reality, sperm is like this small compared to the egg, much, much smaller. So just remember that. Now, why am I showing you this? Because we need both sex cells, one from the male called sperm and one sex cell from the female called the egg. And when they come together in a process called what? Fertilization, this will create a baby, right? Because this sperm is carrying half of Eminem's DNA, right? And this egg is carrying half of Miley Cyrus's DNA. So when they combine, they form a cell that has the normal amount of DNA. And when this, again, I'll make a separate video on oogenesis and a separate video on fertilization. So coming back to what I was saying, when this egg receives the DNA from the Eminem's sperm, then it will have the total amount that a normal cell has. And then now this cell will pretty much just divide by mitosis and grow and grow and grow to form a baby that essentially will have the characteristics of both Eminem and Miley Cyrus, right? This process that this cell was turning into this cell it happens during pregnancy, right? The pregnancy is the phase where this zygote, or this cell that has both Miley Cyrus's DNA and the Eminem's DNA, when it grows into this baby, this is pregnancy, right? So the purpose of this video is for me to focus on this guy here, this egg. Right, I made a video on the sperm structure, so now we're going to talk about the egg structure. Nothing about how it's made, so no oogenesis, no pregnancy, nothing like that, just simply the structures that you need to know regarding the egg. So let's get started. Here we have egg structure. So here's a massive egg. One key thing you need to know is that an egg is one single cell. It's one single large cell. So why, then ask me why are there so many cells here, so many? Because this is not really considered the egg, this outer layer here. This outer layer is considered a protective barrier, and we call this protective barrier that is kind of surrounding the egg the corona radiata, and it is super, super, super important. One, remember this, right? The sperm, I'm going to copy and bring the sperm over. The sperm, right, is going to try and fertilize the egg, right? So in reality, many sperm will reach the egg, many. But only one of them will have the luck of actually succeeding to fertilize the egg. Now, this outer layer called the corona radiata is a protective layer. It prevents all sperms from coming in. It makes it difficult. It's like a little wall. Now, not only that, this layer also provides nutrients for the egg itself. It's like a mom. It's like providing little energy, proteins to keep this egg in good shape. So that's the two main functions of the corona radiata. And don't worry, I'm not writing any of these down because I'm putting them in this table here at the end that you can take a look at the end. So that's the outer layer, corona radiata. Next we have this one here, zona pellucida. This is the layer just under the corona radiata. Now this layer is even crazier. So the purpose of this layer, the first one, is to block and only allow sperm from the same species as the egg. So for example, this is Miley Cyrus's egg, right? So she's a human species, which means that this layer, the zona pellucida, is going to function to only allow sperm from human beings to penetrate it. It's not going to allow sperm from a monkey or a tiger or anything like that to penetrate. That's why you can't become pregnant from, you can't have a kid, two different species together can't have a kid, right? Can't have a kid that is able to have a kid, right? That's the definition of species. So that's why this layer is super important in that way. Now, the other interesting thing is when the sperm comes and it eventually does pass this corona radiata, and it does reach the zona pellucida, now it's going to touch and penetrate through that layer. Once it does so, once the very first sperm entered, this zona pellucida will pretty much harden and become rock solid. Why? Because we only want one sperm to donate the DNA. We don't want a lot of DNA in there. We only want one sperm to donate DNA. Otherwise, we're going to have way too much DNA in here, right? We only want the normal amount of DNA. So as soon as one sperm succeeds, we don't want another one to come in and also donate its DNA. So once this sperm fuses with the zona pellucida, it will pretty much go rock hard, so that when the next sperm comes, it cannot pass it. Okay, so that's another function of the zona pellucida. So let me go to this table. So we call this function of only allowing the same species to fertilize it, we call that the species-specific fertilization, right? And we call it polyspermy. It prevents polyspermy, which means many sperms fertilizing one egg. It prevents that problem. Okay, cool. Those are the two hardest layers, to be honest. Two of the hardest, most important layers. Let's do this one. What's this? That's the nucleus. Real simple, right? This is where the DNA is stored. This is what makes Miley Cyrus, right? And remember, because it's a sex cell, right? Egg and sperm cells only have half the amount of DNA of other cells, because when they combine together, then they form the normal amount of DNA, right? So we call that haploid DNA. So that's that for nucleus. Nucleus is pretty straightforward. Okay, next, cytoplasm, right? We know what cytoplasm is. Cytoplasm is just kind of like a jelly-like liquid, like jelly, that carries all the organelles like mitochondria, nucleus, and all these kinds of things, right? It is a very good environment for everything to survive in. Now, lastly, and this is the hardest one, or the most difficult one for me to explain using this picture, because I think this one will make the most sense when I explain this process. Oogenesis. So maybe definitely you should check out oogenesis to clearly see what this structure is, but right now I can give you a hint, okay? Try and make it a little bit clear, but it's going to make the most sense when you watch that video. So this is called a polar body, and I put a sun here because again it's going to be in that oogenesis video where I'll clearly explain what this is. But basically, what is this? Let's start here. So here we have an egg cell, okay, an egg cell, and it has, at first, this is an immature egg cell. We're going to make a proper egg cell. So this is an immature egg cell, not the mature one yet. And it will have double the amount of DNA, okay? So basically, then it's going to enter meiosis 1. And again, if you don't know what meiosis is, don't worry. I'm going to explain this more properly in the actual oogenesis video. This is just a vague overview. So it's going to enter meiosis 1. So it's basically the DNA is going to split apart, right? And we're going to get something like this. The DNA is going to split apart because it's splitting by meiosis 1. So now the nucleus will have a normal amount of DNA. And then where did the other half go? The other half went into this polar body. That's what a polar body is. It's pretty much what is the other half of the DNA after meiosis happens. So now, and again, this splitting of DNA happens during fertilization. So when the sperm meets the egg, this will happen. This first polar body will be formed. So normally there's not just one, there's actually 3 polar bodies. So now we can go on to meiosis 2. So let me show you. Meiosis 2. Okay, meiosis 2. So now what's going to happen is this DNA, the main nucleus, will split again to form half the number of DNA than a normal cell. And this polar body, which has the other half, will also split by itself. Okay, so I zoomed in here to show you that this polar body is simply a piece of material that has the other half of DNA, right? That's all it is. So now it's going to split again. So guess how many polar bodies we're going to have now? We're going to have another one because this one will split, so that's going to give us 2. But this one will also split into another half, which will give us 3 total. So 1, 2, 3. So after the full process of meiosis and forming the mature egg, we will have 3 polar bodies. three polar bodies. You can clearly see it here, right? Three polar bodies. Now, the sperm, right, which came to donate DNA, right? Because we know after this nucleus splits, it's only going to have half the amount of normal DNA. But when the sperm donates its DNA, so let's say it's this, now when they come together, this will form the normal amount of DNA with a mix of the mom and the dad's DNA. And then this will develop into a baby. So that's the basics. I understand if you don't get this. I didn't explain it clearly in detail what polar bodies are, but it's going to make a lot more sense in the oogenesis video. But for now, just know a polar body is what is formed when the DNA splits. It's basically a leftover of the DNA, until we have the final cell. So here again is a table that explains vaguely the functions that you need to know, and I hope this made sense. Stay tuned for all of these other videos, which is spermatogenesis, oogenesis, pregnancy, fertilization, and that should make everything clear regarding sexual reproduction.